I really appreciate that you brought up that tension that came up around indies being pushed to the back.
Mm.
So, and I want to attack this from like both like a culture perspective, but a business perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So if I think about plants in, let's say the 90s, I think record labels stopped, like meaningfully stopped pressing vinyl around like kind of like the early 90s. I think Guns N' Roses' Spaghetti Incident was like a big deal that it came out on vinyl because it might have been like one of the last records in North America. Because again, for any audience that wouldn't know this, Europe still had like a big vinyl culture, maintained that, but North America was like, it was dead for vinyl. So when I was first became involved with getting records pressed, like my little record label or my friends' record labels or anything, as I said, like plants were psyched, and you'd build these relationships with these people, and you were doing it for your genre of music, and it was a subgenre, it was a teeny little niche.
Yeah.
So it was like your life, it was personal, it was your identity, and you were putting out records that to you were like the most important record that ever existed, even though it's some like record for some teeny little band that's going to exist for 3 or 4 years, you're going to sell 1,000 copies, but it matters to you like the great records of the time or the great works of the time because it's so personal. And you're working with these companies that are barely surviving or, you know, just kind of getting by. So they're hungry for the work. And there's that bond of like, I'm doing this little thing and it matters to you because you're doing this thing that's barely getting by. And you've got that connection.
Right.
And I remember all these little labels when I was younger and really in the mix of music. Just like we talk about who was easy to work with, who was cool, like who kind of got it, who got the music. The plants would kind of go out of their way to like have a good relationship with you. Major labels come back in, and it was as if you had never worked with any of these plants before. They didn't know your name anymore. And I don't want to say that for all the plants, but I do remember this great sense of like, oh shit, like we're the ones who kept your lights going on for so long, and now all it is excuses for not returned phone calls, not returned emails, like we're getting pushed to the back. Because suddenly the major labels are like, oh, well, we want to press 50,000 suddenly. So from a business perspective, I totally get it. It's like you've got these plants who have employees and their families, and you want to be able to run a good business. Of course, you want to court major labels. Of course, you want the bigger business. And it's not that you're doing it to spite other people, but it's like you've got a business to run. On the flip side, there's a whole cultural component, and there's like the business component, the relationship component.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on all that?
I have so many thoughts on that. In my earlier days with Samo, the company I ran where we worked together, appealing to hardcore labels like React was of like vital importance to us. And I remember we kept trying to break into that community, and you know, it proved difficult. And I think it's for some of the things that you touched on, where you know there's a cultural element to it, and there's also you know a bit of a distrust of, let's say, not outsiders, but like if you're going to extend your network, you know, from within from within inside a like a subculture or a culture, right? It almost needs to be vetted and approved in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because then what you're going to want to do, especially in the hardcore community, is to have that as a resource. You know, like a book your own fucking life sort of, you know, compendium of the places that you can trust. So it was hard for us to actually get some attention working with hardcore labels, but we really wanted that because we knew that there was that community element to it, and there were only so many record labels who were really interested. So to me, like hardcore and punk labels held a lot of power, actually. We didn't think of it quite in those terms, but I also knew at the time that because the indies were the ones who kept the lights on at these record pressing plants who were virtually decimated, they had just held on to a couple of presses through either, you know, fatigue about having to get rid of everything, or because they believed in it, but it was still in a dark corner. Because the indies kept that going, I always got the impression that if the majors decided to leave, the indies would still be there. So why would you want to turn your back on that?
Yeah.
Was kind of my question at the time.
Yeah.
Things are different now. Not that you would take anyone for granted, but that I think the major labels are here to stay with vinyl. I think it's been long enough that we can all hopefully agree that it's not a fad that, you know, was for 1 or 2 years and then they're gone. Dude, Taylor Swift keeps our industry going.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say, for anyone who feels like this should just be for, you know, the true believers. Midnight's her last album, the number of variants that we made for that and that sold. I mean, there is enough for plants that have the motivation to grow beyond a few presses. You can work with both majors and indies, and that conflict is now evaporated, in my view, right? Yeah. I think that for us, working with major labels is a great thing because we want to participate working with the artists and labels that are allowing us to grow. The more we can grow, the more we can do interesting things, right? I think there is an argument to be made for that. Like if you're a large plant and you're really successful at it, I think that you can, you know, do things to progress, you know, the service or the available products for indies in a way that you can't do if you're a tiny operation with really like cash-strapped resources.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying there. So no shade on Taylor Swift or anyone who likes Taylor Swift. Awesome, great. Like, because you keep bringing up the idea of gatekeeping, which I is such a cool topic to hit on. And I want to talk about that in a little bit. But like, listen, vinyl's cool. Like, vinyl's cool for everybody. Why shouldn't everyone get to enjoy vinyl? It's an awesome way of connecting with music. It's all the stuff that we talked about earlier. It's just got that deeper psychological connection. There's just something about it. And stuff where there's just something about, that's cool. People should enjoy it, enjoy life. But this kind of reckoning that I think the production side of the record industry has gone through, where it's like, indies, we love you, you're keeping the lights on, to, sorry, who are you? We've got these like major labels, to like, oh shit, we actually better do that. Like we better keep our relationships with these people. I've loved seeing that shift. Like I'm glad to see that it's coming back, because it does seem, well, it does seem a bit more like that kind of look in the mirror. Like, are we chasing the money, or does what we do matter? And if what we do matters, that means relationships matters, not just about the money. Because it's both, right? Because it's a cultural thing. Vinyl is like culture. You know, it's like a painting on the wall. It's like something, it's like a statue. It's like a sculpture. It's any of these things. A piece of vinyl, especially now with all the different ways it can be printed, it is culture. And I think the people on the production side have to view it as like, yeah, there's an economy, and yes, we're involved in building business, but it is culture, and culture means people matter, relationships matter. Being part of something that is like that new band that no one's ever heard of, that's like really created something special. Like we want to be able to be a part of doing that. And it does mean having that reckoning, I think, of like how you do business and why.